The sky burned red above Valeria 7. Fires raged across the land, and thick black smoke curled into the heavens. Explosions thundered in the distance as Jace Callan sprinted through the dense alien jungle. His pulse pounded in his ears. His ship had been shot down an hour ago, and now he was stranded on an unknown world, behind enemy lines. The Valerians were not supposed to be hostile. Their empire was one of the most advanced civilizations in this sector. Yet from what Jace had seen, this planet was a war zone. Something had gone terribly wrong here. His boots crunched over glowing blue moss as he pushed deeper into the jungle. Strange plants twisted toward him as if they could sense his presence. The trees were enormous, their dark silver leaves rustling in the wind. His breathing was heavy, but he forced himself to keep moving. If there were enemies nearby, stopping would be a death sentence. Then he heard it, a scream. Jace froze. It was faint but unmistakable. A woman's voice. His instincts screamed at him to ignore it. This wasn't his fight. He was a mercenary, not a hero. But something about the voice sent a chill down his spine. Gritting his teeth, he crept toward the sound, staying low. He pushed aside thick vines and peered through the foliage. What he saw made his blood run cold. A woman was cornered against a broken stone pillar. Her long, flowing white hair shimmered like moonlight, her violet eyes wide with fear. Her skin was smooth, with delicate silver markings glowing softly along her arms. She wasn't human. She was Valerian. And not just any Valerian. The way she held herself, the golden crest on her torn robe. She had to be royalty. 3 armored figures surrounded her, their weapons glowing with energy. One of them, a towering alien with jagged black armor, stepped forward and raised his blade. "This is where your bloodline ends, princess," he sneered. Jace didn't stop to think. He had 2 choices, run or fight. His hand moved on its own, drawing his blaster in a single motion. He fired. Boom. The closest attacker dropped, clutching his chest. The others spun around in shock. What? Jace was already moving. He rolled forward, dodging a wild energy blast, and slammed his fist into the second attacker's helmet. The force sent the alien stumbling back. The third enemy lunged at him with a blade, but Jace caught his arm and twisted, forcing the alien to the ground. With a swift kick, he knocked the weapon away and fired once. The fight was over. Breathing hard, Jace turned to the woman. She stared at him in disbelief, her chest rising and falling quickly. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she took a slow step forward. "You saved me." Jace exhaled. "Yeah, well, looked like you needed help." Her violet eyes locked onto his. There was something strange about her gaze, an intensity that sent a shiver through him. Then, to his surprise, she placed a hand over her heart and whispered, "It's you." Jace frowned. "What?" Before he could ask anything else, distant footsteps echoed through the jungle. More were coming. "We have to go," she said quickly, grabbing his arm. "If they catch us, they'll kill you too." Jace hesitated. He had just risked his life for this woman, this princess. Now he was tangled in something bigger than himself. But when she looked up at him, there was something desperate in her expression. "Please," she whispered. Jace sighed and checked his blaster. "All right, princess, let's move." Together, they disappeared into the jungle. Jace ran through the dense jungle, his heart pounding. The Valerian princess moved swiftly beside him, her silver-marked skin glowing faintly under the alien moonlight. The distant shouts of their pursuers echoed behind them, growing closer. "How many are after you?" Jace asked, glancing over his shoulder. "At least a dozen," the princess replied, her voice steady but tense. "More if they call reinforcements." Jace muttered a curse. He didn't sign up for this. One minute, he was crash-landing on an unknown planet. The next, he was saving a royal from execution. This was not his fight. Yet here he was. They pushed deeper into the jungle, leaping over thick roots and dodging glowing vines that twisted in the dark. The air was damp, filled with the scent of alien flowers and burning ozone from the earlier battle. After several minutes, the sounds of pursuit faded. Jace slowed, gripping a tree to catch his breath. "All right, princess. Mind telling me what the hell is going on?" The woman turned to him, her violet eyes shimmering under the soft light. She straightened her posture, trying to compose herself despite her torn royal robes. "My name is Cirrus Valthera," she said, her voice carrying the weight of authority. Was, the heir to the Valerian throne." Jace narrowed his eyes. "Was." Cirrus hesitated. Then she sighed, brushing a strand of silver-white hair behind her ear. "My people have fallen," she admitted. "The Zarkari Dominion. The invaders who attacked me betrayed my father, the High Sovereign. They seized control of Velaria 7 and declared our royal bloodline extinct." Jace frowned. He'd heard of the Zarkari, a brutal warrior race that thrived on conquest. But Velaria 7 was supposed to be protected under interstellar treaties. If the Dominion had wiped out the ruling family, then this was bigger than just one planet. "So that's why they were hunting you," Jace muttered. Cirrus nodded. "If they find me, they will finish what they started." Jace sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "And now they'll be after me too." A branch snapped in the distance. Cirrus's eyes widened. "They found us." Jace grabbed her wrist. "Come on." They darted toward a rocky outcrop, weaving through thick undergrowth. Jace spotted a narrow cave hidden between the roots of a massive tree. He pulled Cirrus inside just as figures in dark armor stormed into the clearing. Cirrus tensed, watching through the gaps in the tangled roots. The Zarkari soldiers moved carefully, scanning the jungle with glowing red visors. Jace leaned close and whispered, "Stay quiet." For several agonizing minutes they waited, barely daring to breathe. Finally, the Zarkari moved on, disappearing into the distance. Jace let out a breath and turned to Cirrus. "All right, princess, you got a plan, or are we just running until we drop?" Cirrus met his gaze, her expression unreadable. Then she reached into her robes and pulled out a small metallic device. It pulsed with faint blue light. "This is a royal beacon," she explained. "It was designed to call for help from any surviving Valerian forces." Jace eyed the device warily. "And you didn't use it earlier because—" Cirrus hesitated. "Because if the signal is intercepted, it will reveal my location to everyone, including the Dominion." Jace ran a hand through his dark hair. "So we either risk calling for help or keep running with no way off this planet." Cirrus nodded. Jace sighed. He hated being backed into a corner. But looking at Cirrus, her determination, her desperation, he knew there was only one choice. He held out his hand. "Give me the beacon." Cirrus blinked. "You trust me?" Jace smirked. "Not yet, but I don't see any better options." She placed the beacon in his palm. He activated it. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, someone would hear the call. And Jace could only hope they weren't the enemy. A faint blue glow pulsed from the small device in Jace's palm. The royal beacon was active now, its signal reaching into the vastness of space, calling for help. Cirrus watched the blinking light with an uneasy expression. "There's no turning back now," she murmured. Jace shoved the device into his jacket pocket and leaned against the cave wall. "How long until someone picks it up?" Cirrus shook her head. "Could be minutes. Could be hours." She glanced at him. "Could be the wrong people." Jace smirked. "Yeah, I figured." They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the jungle buzzed with alien life. The faint calls of nocturnal creatures echoed in the distance, mixing with the rustling of wind through the massive trees. Cirrus broke the silence. "You never told me how you got here." Jace sighed. "Didn't exactly plan on a vacation. I was a cargo pilot, taking a job to deliver supplies. My ship got ambushed. Pirates, maybe Zarkari, I don't know. They hit my engines, and I barely made it to the surface in one piece. Cirrus tilted her head. And then you saved me. Jace shrugged. Didn't like the odds you were up against. A small smile tugged at her lips. You are different from most humans I have met. Jace raised an eyebrow. That a compliment? Cirrus smirked but didn't answer. Before Jace could press her further, a sudden whirring noise echoed from the sky. His body tensed. Cirrus turned her head sharply. A ship. Jace moved to the cave entrance and peered through the tangled roots. A sleek black vessel hovered just above the trees, its thrusters humming softly. A red insignia marked its hull. A Zarkari warbird. Jace swore under his breath. Looks like someone answered your call. Cirrus's face paled. Too fast. That signal shouldn't have reached anyone yet. Unless they were already looking for you. Jace finished grimly. The warbird descended, its landing gear unfolding as it touched down in a nearby clearing. A metallic hiss filled the air as the ship's ramp lowered. Jace grabbed Cirrus's wrist. We need to move. Now. But before they could slip deeper into the jungle, heavy footsteps approached. Dark figures emerged from the underbrush, Zarkari soldiers in full armor. Jace reached for his blaster, but Cirrus gripped his arm. No, they'll overpower you. Jace clenched his jaw. His mind raced. No way out. A deep voice echoed through the trees. Cirrus Valthera. A tall Zarkari stepped forward, his dark red armor gleaming under the moonlight. His reptilian features were sharp, and his glowing yellow eyes narrowed as he focused on the princess. Cirrus stiffened. Commander Kale. Jace's grip on his blaster tightened. So she knows him. The Zarkari commander tilted his head. You are difficult to track, princess, but you cannot run forever. His gaze shifted to Jace. And who is this? Human. Jace smirked. Just a guy with bad luck. Cal's lip curled in amusement. That, I believe. He took a slow step forward. Surrender, and I will ensure you are treated with respect. Cirrus lifted her chin. And if I refuse? Kale sighed dramatically. Then I will take you by force. Jace's heart pounded. He wasn't going to let them take her. But how could he fight off an entire squad of trained soldiers? Then, suddenly, a new sound. A deep, thunderous boom echoed from above. Everyone looked up. Another ship appeared in the sky, its silver-blue hull glinting as it descended. It bore the royal crest of Valeria. Cirrus's eyes widened. It's them. Jace grinned. Took them long enough. Kale scowled. This isn't over. He barked an order, and the Zarkari troops retreated toward their warbird. The enemy ship's thrusters ignited, and within moments, they were gone. Jace turned to Cirrus. Looks like your people aren't all gone after all. Cirrus exhaled in relief as the royal ship landed. The hatch opened, revealing Valyrian warriors in gleaming silver armor. A tall man stepped forward, his violet eyes locking onto Cirrus. Princess. Cirrus's voice trembled. General Orion. The older warrior's expression softened. You're safe now. Jace glanced at her. Guess this is where we part ways. Cirrus turned to him, her eyes filled with something unreadable. Then she reached for his hand. No, she said softly. You saved me. You belong with us now. Jace stared at her, caught off guard. And for the first time, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, his bad luck had led him somewhere worth staying. Jace stood still, his mind racing. You belong with us now. Cirrus's words echoed in his head. The Valyrian warriors surrounded them, their polished silver armor reflecting the soft glow of the ship's lights. The air hummed with tension as General Orion stepped closer. He was tall, his violet eyes sharp yet calm, his presence radiating authority. We must leave at once, Orion said, glancing at the dark sky. The Zarkari will return with reinforcements. Cirrus nodded. Understood. Orion's gaze shifted to Jace. And who is this human? Cirrus lifted her chin. He saved my life. Jace smirked. Yeah, and almost lost mine doing it. Orion studied him for a moment, then gave a small nod. Then you have the gratitude of the Valerian Empire. He turned to his soldiers. Bring them aboard. Jace followed Cirrus up the ramp of the royal cruiser. The inside was sleek and metallic, with a faint blue glow lining the walls. The moment they stepped inside, the ship hummed to life. The doors sealed, and a soft vibration ran through the floor as the engines engaged. Jace let out a breath. So, where are we going? Cirrus looked at him. Valeria. My home. Jace raised an eyebrow. I don't suppose I get a choice in this. Cirrus smiled slightly. Would you rather stay here? Jace considered that. The jungle was full of hostile creatures, Zarkari warbirds, and no way off the planet. He sighed. Fine, but I better get a hot meal out of this. Cirrus laughed softly. I think we can arrange that. Aboard the Valerian cruiser, Jace stood at the observation window, watching the planet shrink below them. It was strangely beautiful from this high up, a swirl of blue and green, surrounded by endless stars. Cirrus joined him, standing just a few inches away. Have you ever been to Valeria before? She asked. Jace shook his head. Never even heard of it. She looked amused. Humans still know so little about the galaxy. Jace smirked. Maybe. But I seem to be learning fast. Cirrus's expression softened. You have already done more than most would. You had no reason to save me. No obligation. And yet you did. Jace leaned against the window. I don't like seeing innocent people get hurt. Simple as that. Cirrus studied him for a moment. Then she turned slightly, her silver-white hair catching the light. There is something you should know before we arrive. Jace crossed his arms. This sounds serious. Cirrus hesitated. Valeria is different from Earth. Our customs, our traditions, they are not like yours. Jace frowned. Like what? She took a slow breath. The bond between those who save each other's lives is sacred. It is not taken lightly. Jace's brow furrowed. What are you saying? Cirrus looked away for a moment, then met his gaze. To my people, you are not just my rescuer. You are my fated one. Jace blinked. What now? Cirrus's voice was quiet but steady. By saving me, you have unknowingly entered a Valerian life bond. It means our fates are now tied together. Jace opened his mouth, then closed it. Hold on. Are you telling me? I accidentally got engaged. Cirrus's cheeks tinted a faint blue, a Valerian blush. Not quite. But it means that I am bound to you in ways you do not yet understand. Jace ran a hand through his hair. Great. So now I'm a hero and a cosmic fiancé. Cirrus let out a soft laugh. Not exactly. But you will be treated as one of us when we arrive. And many will expect you to stay. Jace exhaled. Well, guess I really did sign up for more than a hot meal. Cirrus smiled. Yes, you did. As the ship sped toward Valeria, Jace had the sinking feeling that his adventure was only just beginning. Jace stood near the viewport, watching as the planet Valeria grew larger. It was stunning, a world of silver-blue oceans, towering crystalline cities, and lush green landscapes. Unlike Earth, the sky had a soft violet hue, and the 3 moons hanging in the distance gave the world an almost dreamlike beauty. Cirrus stood beside him, her silver-white hair cascading over her shoulders. It's beautiful, isn't it? Jace nodded. I've seen a lot of planets, but nothing like this. Cirrus smiled. Welcome to my home. The ship trembled slightly as it entered the atmosphere. Valerian cruisers, sleek and elegant, soared alongside them, escorting the vessel toward the grand city below. Jace turned to Cirrus. So, what happens when we land? Cirrus hesitated. There will be a formal welcome. My father, the High Sovereign, will want to meet you. Jace raised an eyebrow. Your father, as in the king. She nodded. He will have questions, especially about our bond. Jace rubbed the back of his neck. Right. The whole fated one thing. Cirrus's expression softened. I know this is overwhelming, but I promise, you are safe here. Jace sighed. I'll believe that when I'm not standing in front of an alien king explaining why I accidentally bonded with his daughter. Cirrus let out a small laugh. Just be yourself. The ship touched down with a gentle hum, and the doors slid open. A rush of warm, floral-scented air greeted them. Outside, an elegant city of crystalline towers and glowing pathways stretched across the landscape. Valerians in flowing garments of deep blue and silver gathered, their curious eyes fixed on the humans stepping off the royal cruiser. Jace exhaled. All right, here we go. The High Sovereign's court. Jace followed Cirrus and General Orion through a grand corridor made of shimmering glass-like stone. Valerian banners hung from the walls, their symbols glowing faintly with energy. Guards stood at attention, their silver armor reflecting the soft blue light that illuminated the hall. Finally, they entered a massive chamber. At the far end sat a man on an intricate throne, the High Sovereign. He was imposing, tall with piercing violet eyes, sharp angular features, and long silver hair tied back in a regal fashion. A heavy royal mantle rested over his shoulders, and his expression was unreadable. Jace stood straight, feeling the weight of those powerful eyes on him. Cirrus stepped forward and bowed. Father. The High Sovereign's voice was deep and commanding. My daughter, you have returned. His gaze shifted to Jace. And you have brought a guest. Cirrus nodded. This is Jace. He saved my life. The High Sovereign studied Jace with quiet intensity. A human. Jace cleared his throat. Yeah. Nice to meet you, Your Majesty. The High Sovereign remained silent for a moment. Then he gestured to a nearby advisor. The man, dressed in elaborate robes, stepped forward and whispered something in the king's ear. Finally, the High Sovereign spoke. We owe you a debt for protecting my daughter. But tell me, do you understand what you have done? Jace shifted uncomfortably. Look, I didn't mean to bond with your daughter. I was just trying to help. A murmur spread through the court. Cirrus quickly stepped in. Father, he does not understand our ways. He acted selflessly. The High Sovereign watched Jace carefully. Then he leaned forward. Human, do you know what it means to be the fated one of a Valerian royal? Jace rubbed his temples. Not really, but I get the feeling I'm about to find out. The High Sovereign's eyes gleamed. It means that by saving her, you have become bound to her fate. You are now part of our world. Jace took a slow breath. So, what does that mean for me? The High Sovereign's lips curled into a knowing smile. It means you have a choice. You can return to your own kind, or you can stand beside Cirrus and claim your place in Valerian society. Jace blinked. Wait, are you saying I could stay? Cirrus turned to him, her expression hopeful. Yes. Jace exhaled. He had come to this planet by accident, but now he had a decision to make. As the court awaited his answer, Jace knew one thing for sure. His life had just changed forever. Jace stood frozen in the grand hall of the Valerian palace. The weight of the High Sovereign's words hung over him like a heavy cloud. Stay and become part of Cirrus's world, or leave and return to his old life. His eyes flickered to Cirrus, who watched him with quiet hope. Her silver-white hair shimmered under the soft glow of the palace lights, and her violet eyes held something he hadn't seen before. Fear, not of him, but of his choice. Jace took a slow breath. If I stay, what happens to me? The High Sovereign leaned back in his throne. You will learn our ways. You will be treated as an honored guest, but also as one of us. His eyes narrowed slightly. However, there are those who will not welcome an outsider. Jace glanced at the gathered nobles. Some of them whispered among themselves, throwing him suspicious glances. He wasn't surprised. a human bonding with a royal Valerian. That probably wasn't part of their traditions. General Orion stepped forward, his golden armor reflecting the soft blue glow of the palace. "With all due respect, Your Majesty, is it wise to allow an off-worlder such a place of honor?" His golden eyes flicked toward Jace. "He does not understand our customs. He may be a risk." Jace crossed his arms. "I'm standing right here, you know." Cirrus frowned. "Jace is not a threat." She turned to her father. "You said it yourself. He saved my life. And whether he meant to or not, the bond has been formed. We cannot change that." The High Sovereign studied Jace for a long moment before finally giving a nod. "Very well." His voice echoed through the chamber. "Jace of Earth, you will remain on Valeria under the protection of my daughter, but you must prove yourself worthy of this honor." Jace raised an eyebrow. "Prove myself." The High Sovereign's lips curled slightly. "You will be tested." The first trial. Later that evening, Jace stood in the middle of a massive courtyard surrounded by towering crystalline walls. The air was warm, carrying the scent of alien flowers that glowed faintly in the dimming light. Ceres stood beside him, her expression serious. "The trials are a Valerian tradition. Outsiders are rarely allowed to take them." Jace smirked. "Lucky me." Ceres shook her head. "This is not a joke, Jace. My father is giving you a chance to prove yourself. But if you fail, things will become very difficult for you here." Jace exhaled. "All right. What's the first trial?" Ceres gestured toward the far end of the courtyard. A set of massive doors slid open, revealing a large, circular arena made of polished stone. In the center stood a tall figure clad in dark armor. His silver hair was tied back, and his piercing blue eyes locked onto Jace, like a predator sizing up its prey. Ceres's voice was tense. "That is Commander Raylis. He is one of Valeria's greatest warriors." Jace rolled his shoulders. "Great. Let me guess. I have to fight him." Ceres hesitated before nodding. "Yes, but this is not just about strength. It is about skill and honor." Jace sighed. "Of course it is." He stepped into the arena, feeling the cool stone beneath his boots. Commander Raylis unsheathed a sleek, glowing energy blade and pointed it at him. "You are untrained, off-worlder," Raylis said coldly. "This will be over quickly." Jace smirked. "We'll see about that." A chime echoed through the courtyard, the signal to begin. Raylis moved first, his blade cutting through the air in a flash of blue light. Jace barely dodged in time, feeling the heat of the energy blade graze past him. "Fast," Jace muttered, "but not fast enough." Raylis lunged again. This time, Jace was ready. He ducked, rolled to the side, and grabbed a training staff from a nearby rack. The moment he turned, Raylis was already there, striking down hard. Jace barely managed to block, the force sending vibrations up his arms. He gritted his teeth. "Okay, that actually hurt." Raylis didn't respond. He just kept attacking. Fast, precise, relentless. Jace was forced to move, dodging and blocking, but it was clear that Raylis had the upper hand. From the sidelines, Ceres watched with growing concern. Jace was strong and quick, but he lacked the refined technique of a Valerian warrior. Jace knew it too. If he kept fighting Raylis on his terms, he would lose. Then an idea struck him. He didn't have to fight like a Valerian. He had to fight like a human. Raylis swung again. Instead of blocking, Jace ducked low and swept his opponent's legs out from under him. The crowd gasped. Raylis hit the ground hard, caught completely off guard. Jace didn't hesitate. He moved fast, placing his staff against Raylis's throat before he could recover. Silence. Then, the sound of slow, deliberate clapping. Jace looked up. The High Sovereign was watching from a balcony, a small smile on his face. The morning sun cast a golden glow over the Valerian palace as Jace stretched his sore muscles. His fight with Raylis had left him bruised, but the victory had given him a newfound confidence. He had proven he wasn't just some weak off-worlder. But as he stood in the towering hall of the palace, waiting for the next trial to begin, he couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest challenge was yet to come. Ceres stood beside him, her silver-white hair flowing over her royal cloak. "This trial will not test your strength," she said, her violet eyes filled with concern. "It will test your mind." Jace raised an eyebrow. "What does that mean?" The doors to the chamber swung open, revealing the High Sovereign seated on his grand throne. Beside him stood an elderly Valyrian woman dressed in deep blue robes, her piercing gray eyes scanning Jace like she could see into his very soul. "This is Elder Vayna," Ceres whispered. "She is the keeper of the mind trial. Only those with true wisdom and resolve can pass." Jace sighed. "Great. I barely made it through school, and now I have to pass an alien test of wisdom." Ceres smirked. "You will do fine." Jace wasn't so sure. The High Sovereign's voice echoed through the chamber. "Step forward, Jace of Earth." Jace took a deep breath and walked toward the center of the room. The floor beneath him pulsed with a soft blue glow as Elder Vayna raised her hand. "You will enter the trial of illusions," she said. "Your mind will be tested with visions, some true, some false. You must find the truth within the lies. If you fail, you will be lost within your own thoughts forever." Jace's stomach twisted. "Wait, what?" Before he could protest, Vayna pressed her fingertips to his forehead. The world around him vanished, lost in the illusion. Jace opened his eyes and found himself back on Earth. He stood in the middle of a familiar street, the smell of rain filling the air. Neon lights flickered overhead, and distant cars rumbled down the road. His heart pounded. No way. He turned and saw his old apartment building. Everything was exactly as he remembered, down to the crack in the sidewalk he used to trip over every morning. Had it all been a dream? Valyria, Ceres, the trials. A voice called from behind him. "Jace?" He spun around. His best friend, Lucas, stood there, looking confused. "Dude, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Jace blinked. His pulse raced. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. He grabbed Lucas by the shoulders. "How did I get here?" Lucas frowned. "What do you mean? You never left." Jace clenched his jaw. Think. If this was the trial, then this was an illusion. He had to find the lie. He looked at Lucas again, closely. Something was off. The way he blinked, the way his lips moved when he spoke, it wasn't quite natural. Jace took a step back. "You're not real, are you?" Lucas tilted his head. "What are you talking about?" "Of course I am." Jace shook his head. "No, you're just part of the test." The moment he said it, the world around him shattered. Facing the truth, Jace found himself back in the palace chamber, gasping for breath. Elder Vayna studied him carefully. "You broke the illusion faster than I expected." Jace wiped sweat from his forehead. "I knew it wasn't real. My heart wanted to believe it, but my mind knew better." The High Sovereign gave a small nod. "Impressive." Ceres smiled with relief. "I knew you could do it." Jace let out a breath. 2 trials down, 1 more to go. But he had a feeling. The hardest test was still ahead. Jace barely had time to catch his breath before the High Sovereign rose from his throne. The chamber fell silent as the ruler's deep voice echoed through the hall. "You have passed the first 2 trials, strength and wisdom. But the final trial is the most difficult of all," he declared. "This is the trial of the heart." Jace frowned. "What does that mean?" Elder Vayna stepped forward, her piercing gray eyes locking onto his. "It is a test of loyalty, of love, and of sacrifice," she said. "You will be given a choice. Only your heart can decide." Ceres shifted uncomfortably beside him. Jace noticed her fists clenching. Whatever this trial was, she knew it wouldn't be easy. 2 armored guards entered, carrying a small glowing cube. They placed it on a pedestal in the center of the room. The moment it touched the surface, it hummed with a strange alien energy. "This cube," the High Sovereign said, "holds a command that will be given only to you." Jace's heart pounded as the cube pulsed with light. Then a voice entered his mind. "Choose. Remain on Valeria as Sirius's fated mate, or return to Earth and forget all of this." Jace's breath hitched. Return to Earth. Forget everything. His mind spun. He had dreamed about space adventures as a kid. He had longed to escape his ordinary life. And now, here he was, standing in a grand palace, proving himself to an alien empire. But the second part of the message made his chest tighten. If he stayed, he would be bound to Sirius forever. Valerian law was absolute when it came to fated mates. He wasn't sure he fully understood the depth of their customs yet, but he knew one thing: it was permanent. His gaze drifted to Sirius. She wasn't looking at him. Her jaw was tight, her violet eyes fixed on the floor. She wasn't going to influence his choice. This was his decision. Jace exhaled sharply. "If I choose to leave, what happens to Sirius?" Elder Vaina's voice was calm but firm. "She will live, but she will never have another mate." Jace's stomach twisted. He glanced at Sirius again. Did she want him to stay? Did she even have a choice? The silence in the chamber stretched. Every eye was on him. Then Sirius finally spoke. "If you do not want this, I will not force you." Her voice was steady, but Jace could hear the strain underneath. "Your life is your own, Jace." Jace clenched his fists. His life was his own, but so was his heart. He thought about everything they had been through. The way she had saved him, the way she had fought beside him, the way she had trusted him when no one else did, and the way his heart ached at the thought of never seeing her again. Jace knew his choice. "I'm staying," he said, his voice firm. Sirius's head snapped up, her eyes wide with surprise. "What?" Jace took a deep breath and stepped closer. "I don't want to go back to Earth. I don't want to forget any of this, and I sure as hell don't want to lose you." For the first time, Sirius's royal composure cracked. A small, relieved smile touched her lips. "You are certain?" Jace smirked. "I think I've fought enough alien warriors, passed enough weird mind tests, and nearly died enough times to prove I belong here." The High Sovereign watched him for a long moment, then nodded. "The trial of the heart is complete. Jace of Earth, you are now a part of Valeria." A cheer erupted through the chamber. Sirius looked at Jace, her expression softening. Then, in a rare moment of vulnerability, she reached for his hand. He squeezed it gently. Maybe fate had brought him here. Maybe it hadn't. But in that moment, Jace knew he had found his place, and he wasn't going anywhere.